Approve request to the Knox County Internal Auditor to conduct an audit and independent risk review of the School Nutrition Services Department of the Knox County Schools pending the authorization of the Knox County Commission.
Ms. Roundtree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to amend that motion on the School Nutrition Department audit by adding to it a request to the Knox County Audit Committee to perform an external forensic audit of the Knox County Schools credit cards going back 5 years using Pugh and Company, our external auditors.
Is there a second to Ms. Roundtree's motion?
I second that motion.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Fugit. Ms. Fugit.
I was just confused because, so we're going to do that all in one motion rather than doing the credit cards as a separate item, which we could do, because I don't care either way. I just gets kind of confusing. But so is there a motion on the floor? Ms. Roundtree made an amendment that we accepted. So now we got a second on the amendment. We have to vote to add that and then vote on the motion.
Right.
Okay. I'm just trying to get clarification.
Ms. Carson.
You know, again, I think this is very similar to the issue I brought up earlier. It is really a totally different item. I have no objection to having an item to also ask for an audit, but the audit that we've already discussed with, I think the County Commission has already had the discussion and approved it. So we would eliminate the approval they already have by adding on to it. I think it's just another item that needs to come before the board, but I don't know that you resolve that by tagging on when they're two different departments.
If the maker of the motion withdrew, or the amendment withdrew, and then we had a separate motion dealing with the subject that she wished to deal with, are you comfortable with that?
Well, it's adding an agenda item that's not been noticed, and it's just how a body functions following the rules, and it's, I
understand what you're saying, but I think
I would think the executive committee could get together if they chose to do that, and then the board ratify it later. But I don't know that we just arbitrarily. I mean, if you want to add to the agenda, my understanding of the way you add to the agenda is you make a motion, a request to add, and then the board can unanimously approve that. But that's how you add an item to the agenda.
Well, the board doesn't necessarily have to unanimously approve.
When you add an item, my understanding, and I could be wrong, of Robert's rules is when you add an item to the agenda that has not been previously on there on the night of the agenda, it needs to be unanimous approval.
Mr. Law Director.
If you're amending the agenda and you're adding an item to the agenda, if you go by Robert's Rules of Order, if you want it on consent, it has to be unanimous approval. This board, however, and I know this is going to throw you for a curve, is highly unique because the state has given you the authority and power that a majority vote conducts all business, and which would, in fact, supersede the rules of the necessary vote under Robert's Rules, even though you've adopted Robert's Rules. When it comes into conflict, 5 votes could add it. That being said, the board can amend. If you're talking about requesting an audit, then you can amend it to audit whatever you want to audit. That could either an existing amendment, or you can add it as a new item. It's totally up to the discretion of this board as how it wants to conduct the business at hand. So if you wanted to count it as a new item, then you can go through that process. If you wanted to amend an existing item, if it is in the same vein of we want to request an audit, the statutory way to approach this, if there is a concern, truthfully, is that the director of schools should approach county commission and make a report that certain things are at hand, and then they, in turn, would probably refer it to the audit committee, which would determine the probable cause of whether they would implement an audit or not. But this board can request anybody to look and take under consideration what it wants at any time. I know I rambled on that, but it was a little convoluted the way things are packaging up in the question. So the question to add it would be statutorily for this board, you can make a motion, get a second, 5 votes would add anything to your agenda. You can amend any item subject to this board's approval by 5 votes. 5 votes from this board can do anything you want to do in terms of the management and controls of this school system that's currently established or that may be established in the future. And so you have great discretion in how you want to manage it and how you want to run your business. So I think that's enough.
Thank you. Yeah, as the law director said, the state does give us some power and some leeway. It's not just as simple as always what Robert's Rules of Order say, although that's what we try to use for the most part, but there are exceptions. Now, we have a motion to amend, and it's been properly seconded. What, as maker of the amendment, Ms. Roundtree, do you wish to proceed with that or withdraw that and create a separate motion?
My understanding from what the law director said, it's fine to have it as an amendment. Is that correct, Mr. Law Director? That's what I understood in all of that.
It requires, it's my understanding from what he said, it requires 5 votes to add it either way. Is that correct?
Either way, you can either do it as a motion here, or do it to add, but the effect of the body would be 5 votes to do whatever it is you're wanting to do. You have a motion on the floor and a second on the floor. You can have discussion on that motion and its merits and have a 5-point vote, and then you go to the combined issue. Or you can state this as a combined substitute motion, meaning combining the 2 things together as a motion, and if you have a second, 5 votes completes that act. You can split the question, make a new addition to the agenda, get a second, 5 votes would take care of that. So with 5 votes, this board can do pretty much what it wants to do. And I'm not going to tell you how to approach it. It's just entirely up to how you all want to do business.
Ms. Fugit.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. I'm not going to take objection to anything the law director said. I just would reiterate the point he made about how we would like to do business. And I think part of the concern, or part of what I think you're hearing, is that we would prefer to do business with dealing with one item at a time. Not that I would oppose doing it separately, but it feels a little gotcha when it's done like this. I think when it's added to, I'm just being honest, I think that's how it feels. I don't think anybody has a problem with doing a separate thing, but moving it off of consent, doing an amendment, I think it would just be cleaner and would, for the functioning of this board, it would make me feel better to do them as 2 separate items. If you want to keep them as one, I'm not saying I won't vote for them, but I think the question was about the spirit of the way we like to operate. So that would be my only comment. But whatever you want to do, I'm supporting an audit of the credit cards. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. It's just, do we want to do it all lumped in one or 2 separate items?
Under normal circumstances, I understand totally what you're saying and agree with it, but because this has been in the news and I think some members at least feel some urgency to act on it. Well, yeah, that's what you said.
I agree, and I think we can do it in a separate motion tonight and accomplish the same thing and vote yes. That was my only question. Okay. It's not we need to wait to do this. It's that I would prefer to do it as 2 separate items because we already have county commission consent to move forward with the other audit, and it would be nice just to be able to go to County Commission this month saying we've already approved and requested this, and then them get to do it. It keeps it very clear, but I agree with you, Ms. Roundtree, it is urgent and we need to do it. I would just prefer to do it as two separate items.
Ms. Etheridge?
She covered what I was going to say. It just seems like it needs to be separated to keep it clean, so there won't be any confusion.
Ms. Roundtree?
Yeah, I guess that was the reason I was just adding it, was due to it being in the news and wanting to make sure that it was done in an expedient and timely manner was the reason I was combining it in that way. It wasn't to be a gotcha in any way, just to make sure it's done as quickly as possible.
Ms. Carson?
Is it on? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's me.
Oh, that's
Doctor?
I don't have anything to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't obviously have a vote or objection to any of the motion, but I guess the concern I would have is that I think the way I heard the motion, it names a specific vendor in the motion, and I'm wondering if that's appropriate or if there might need to be a procurement process to occur and to give the flexibility for that to occur rather than naming a specific vendor in the motion might be more appropriate.
Ms. Roundtree?
My understanding was that Pew & Company is the company that we have contracted with to do the external auditing, so I think that's what the county has in place already.
Ms. Carson?
Again, it's just wording, and so the board does not have the ability to choose the vendor. The county commission has chosen the vendor, and it's just a wording thing, but when we word it that way, we're telling county commission who to use to do an audit, which we don't want to do if we want an audit. If you want to say an audit of county commission's choosing or the appropriate vendor per county commission, you know, it's just, again, it's more a wording issue than the fact before us. And just for point of order, I don't know, I know we got an amendment and a second to the amendment, but I don't know that we ever had a motion on the floor to amend. Just from, I may have missed that, but I just recalled the item being read and Ms. Roundtree offering her amendment. So just as whenever we move forward toward the vote, just be aware of that.
To be honest, I don't remember. To be honest, it was clear what she wanted to do, and the amendment was stated, and it was seconded. Ms. Roundtree, well, I guess it's basically if you want to proceed with this, or if you want to, if you wish to make it a separate item, since you're the one that raised the question.
Yeah, I think just proceeding as it was, but my understanding was that Pew & Company is the contracted company. It's not that I was picking them specifically, but it's who they are already contracted with and would use. That's why I actually put that instead of just a local accounting firm. So, proceed.
Okay, we have a motion that has been properly seconded. I guess, Mr. Etheridge.
Okay, I'm a little confused because, as Ms. Karen Carson stated, regardless of whether that is the vendor they use, it's not up to us to put it in a motion. So I would say that that needs to be taken in consideration. Law Director, is it up to us to designate?
It's the maker of the motion that has to, is my understanding, that has to take it out.
I understand that, but I'm just saying if it's adequate or inadequate before we vote on something, I would like to be clear on whether we can designate something from the commissioners.
Law Director.
What you're actually doing, whether you're enumerating it or spelling it out or not, the way it's structured in Knox County, you're requesting that they consider an audit. they have an internal auditor and an external auditor, and you're requesting that they use their external auditor, which is in fact Pugh and Company, which is in fact already a procured vendor for this activity. So, I mean, it's okay to do that because you're really not telling County Commission or the Audit Committee to do anything. You're requesting and asking them, and then they will consider it. They'll make a motion or a recommendation to County Commission, who then will either acquiesce or not. And under the general guidelines of the auditor, and I don't know for sure, they may already be looking at things.
So if that's the case, we don't necessarily even have to put it in the motion.
Well, if you're going to refer anything, and you have to act as a body. Yeah, you have to put it in a motion if you're going to act as a body to make a recommendation for anything.
You have to designate who does the audit, or do you just request an audit be made? I guess I'm confused.
It's however you want to do it as this board. If you want to request an audit be made using the outside auditor, then you would state that. If you want an audit to be made requesting them to consider one using the internal auditor, then you would state that. If you just want an audit to be made, then you would just state that. It's at the privilege of this body, however you want to state your request, whether you want to state it directly to commission, whether you want to state it to the audit committee, and it's however you all want to do it. There's no real, chiseled in stone way. They will consider the request. They will weigh it according to probable cause at the audit level. If it comes to county commission, they will probably, I can't speak for them, but they would either say order it done or refer it to the committee to be reviewed and recommended. I have no idea what will happen after it goes, so you're just requesting that something happen. And however you deem it to be, and they can say, well, we'll do an audit, but we're not going to do this, or we'll do that, or we'll use the external auditor, but they won't know what you're considering unless you just kind of ask. So however you want to do it, it's up to this body. Y'all do anything you want to.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because if we designate and they're backed up, then they can either choose to go somewhere else on their own, if they so choose.
Right.
If they decide to do it.
The real decision based on your request, they may say, yeah, we'll do the audit, but we're not going to do it that way. It would not be a slam to this body in any way. They look and they'll evaluate their resources and how they are best approaching it. They may be approaching it some other way that even nobody knows because of the association's issues related to it that are currently going on that we've all read about. So some things are done many different ways. So if you want to just request one, they may have already chosen a vehicle to fly with. Maybe one we don't even know about.
Ms. Roundtree, if you will restate your amendment so the secretary can get it in writing, please. Then we'll vote.
Okay. I move to amend the motion on the school nutrition department audit by adding to it a request to the Knox County Audit Committee to perform an external forensic audit of the Knox County Schools credit cards going back 5 years using Pugh and Company, our external auditors.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Motion carries. The consent. Or motion.
So did we approve the amendment, or did we approve the entire motion?
We approved the entire thing, but we didn't approve the consent agenda.
Oh,
We just
okay.
approved.
Okay, because
Because it was pulled out, and she amended that.
She amended the
particular
motion. It
item.
wasn't her amendment that we approved. I thought we approved her amendment, and then we had to approve the whole motion, but if it's all in one. Okay.
Generally, that is what you would do, approve an amendment and a motion, but sometimes we just suspend all rules and do whatever we want.
It has the same
Mr. Chairman.
effect, I believe.
I think we ought to. We voted on the amendment. I think the proper thing to do is to vote on the motion.
Okay, we'll vote on the motion again. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, the motion carries unanimously.